Hey guys, it's Donald, the solo RPG guy here. If you're a follower of my channel, you are well aware that when it comes to solo role playing, I just love using my cards. And if you've been around solo role playing for any length of time, somebody has told you about the Mythic GM game emulator book available at DriveThruRPG. Well, when I came across this, the Mythic Game Master Emulator deck, basically the Mythic Game Emulator in card form, you know I had to get it. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of how it works, and you might want to add this to your arsenal for your solo RPG, or you can add it to your arsenal if you're a DM somewhere. Now I'm just going to go over the basics here of the Mythic Game Emulator deck. Well, what is the Mythic Game Master Emulator deck? It's a role-playing tool designed to emulate the thinking and decisions of the Game Master running your RPG adventure. It lets you play your favorite solo games, role-playing games solo, or with others without a GM. It also allows you to sit down without preparation and let Mythic create an adventure from start to finish, answering all your questions as you go. It is based on the Mythic role-playing system, the Mythic Game Emulator books. It also encompasses rules from Mythic Variations and Mythic Variations 2. It includes answering your fate questions, event focus, meaning, scene setup, complex questions, and descriptive meaning tables. You can get the PDF and printable version as well as the physical copies of the cards from DriveThruRPG, and I'll put that link below. The Mythic deck is designed to answer your questions about your ongoing adventure. Those questions propel your adventure forward. The questions Mythic answers are your opening scene, if you have no idea how to start. It answers all your fate questions with the yes-no format you've come to know from Mythic, as well as the exceptional yeses and exceptional no. Plus, it may even toss in a random event along with your answer. Of course, it can also toss in, well, events that aren't necessarily connected to the results of a fate question. They're usually random events that occur along with a fate question. They also happen when a scene interrupt occurs, after you create your opening scene, or whenever you want to generate an event to answer a question. It will allow you to help with your scene setup. After all, your adventure is broken down into scenes, and after your opening scene, when the adventure moves on, you decide what is the most likely next scene is. The expected scene, or what they refer to as the expected scene. What is your most likely scene? Mythic will answer whether that scene begins as expected, if it's altered in some way, or if it's interrupted in a completely new, unexpected scene. You can also ask the Mythic deck to describe an action for you. These cards will give you a two-word or phrase combination that you interpret into an action to answer your question. Mythic can also give you a description. Let's say you're in a room and you want a description of the room, or in general, or if you want something, okay, there is an altar in this room. Can you give me a description of that altar? Or can you give me a description of the treasure I just found? It will generate for you a description to help you along your way. Well, how do you prepare to play? There are four types of cards in the Mythic deck. The Mythic cards themselves, a pair of reference cards, the list cards, and a special card called the shuffle card. You separate out these cards by the color of the backing. There are 100 gold back cards, which includes the shuffle card, the blue back cards, and 17 red back cards. You shuffle the Mythic deck up, and you shuffle it like a normal deck of cards. You flip it around because the cards are dual-sided, so you get twice as much use out of the cards. So go ahead and reverse the cards a lot while you shuffle. Here is the breakdown of the Mythic card itself. You'll see at the top it has event focus. This one's talking about a remote event. This one's talking about an ambiguous event. You also have the action and subject words for answering an event and action questions. You have your yes and no, of course, as well as exceptional yeses. And then you also have, depending on what the chaos factor is, the chance for an event should this no occur. Not only do you get a no to your answer, but now you have a random event occurring if your chaos factor lies between 3 and 9. You get your scene setup. Like I said before, you determine what your scene expected is. Using my setting up video, for example, let's say the scene I'm getting ready to go to is the scene where the adventurers are going into town to talk to the druid. Well, if if I draw this card and I have a chaos factor of 1 only, it's expected. I get to the druid no problem. But if I have a chaos factor of 2 through 9, then all of a sudden my characters will experience some type of interrupt. You also get some descriptive answers here for words for answering descriptive questions, such as what does the treasure look like? Or what does the sword look like? What does the mountain look like? And then you'll draw 2 cards and place them side by side. Anxiously rotten. Okay, that may not make a whole lot of sense. If you can make sense out of it, then fine. But perfectly aromantic, okay, whatever it is I'm looking at, it obviously smells good. It's enticing to the nose. The cards are double-sided, like I said, so you can get different results depending on which side lands upright. Once you got your cards set up, you take your reference, one of your reference cards, which in this case is the way you keep track of your chaos factor, and you put a die or a token on the number 5. That's usually where it starts. After you have completed a scene, if the PC was somewhat victorious or the circumstances were more positive, you will drop the chaos factor by 1 after each scene. If the PCs were more on a negative side or lost control of the situation, then you would go ahead and move the chaos factor up 1. Have a spare sheet of paper nearby because there's a couple things you're going to want to keep track of. You want to keep track of your threads and you want to keep track of your characters. Threads are the active, open storylines occurring at the time. And what you'll do is you will put a name to describe that thread, and you will draw one of the reference cards which has a number on it, and you'll put that number there. And then you'll put your characters. Now, characters are not just NPCs. They can be anything. They can be the environment, the forest, the mountain range. If that has some type of significance on your play, then go ahead and include that as a character. You can also include, sentient magic items or treasures of great worth. There is nothing limiting on your character list. Anything, any person or object that has any significance in your adventure can go on your character list. As you see here, there are reference cards, and all the reference cards do is have numbers on them. Sorry about that electronic hiccup. There are 17 reference cards. The PDF that you get along with the cards, if you get in the print and play format, or if you purchase the physical cards, be sure to purchase the PDF along with the cards. The PDF will come free when you purchase the cards. But here you can see they're given a example of how the cards are used. For example, they have a character here who's after a bad guy named Nargle. He's running through the jungle with some beasts. There's a living statue, some villagers, and the jungle itself. It goes through how to set up your scenes, your opening scene, what the next scene is. You can use Mythic to generate events. If you have an event question that pops up, you have your actions and descriptive questions. and a generic scene setup. Example questions for the fate would be like, does the guard closely examine my fake ID? Is the room occupied? Does the prisoner offer information for his freedom? Event questions might be, what does the ship log say happened, or what caused the war? Action questions are, what does the cornered bank robber do, or what does the magic green do when we activate it? Descriptive questions, what does your robot look like? What does the place look like beyond the portal? You can use the Mythic cards to, answer those questions, or whatever questions you come up with as they relate to your scene. Mythic relies totally on your interpretation of the results to get the final outcomes of your adventure. It'll give you a few pieces of the information, you already know the context of the adventure itself, so you combine these elements to let your imagination conjure from them an interpretation that makes sense. And of course, over time, the more you do this, the easier it gets. When I first started solo role playing, that was one of the problems I had. But after utilizing the Mythic cards and playing with my other cards, it's become a little bit easier. As you remember my first video, the Game Master Assistance cards, I still use those, and that is what actually helped me break that mindset that we all have a problem breaking when we play RPGs solo. There's also what's called the I don't know rule. Let's go over that real quick. The magic of Mythic works through mixing a few bits of information with the context at hand and finalized with a heavy dose of interpretation. Your imagination converts that small amount of information into something grander and more useful. Maybe you know the answer to the question, does the wizard attack with a spell, is yes. Maybe you know the wizard has a penchant for fire magic. Maybe you asked for an action description and Mythic gave you return pleasures. Maybe knowing these things, you come up with an instant and brilliant interpretation that makes perfect and logical sense. And then maybe you don't. When it's time for you to interpret Mythic's results and you have no idea what it all means, there are a couple things you can do. You can ask another fate question to clarify your results. I would limit yourself to no more than 3 questions total. However, otherwise this process can drag on. You don't want it to drag on. The other thing you could do is say, I don't know. Forget the results and move on. This would be the equivalent of a nothing happens result. If something needs to happen, then you can go with whatever would be the most logical thing, regardless of what you got from Mythic. If it's something that wouldn't be missed if it didn't happen, like a random event, then ignore the event and keep playing. Invoke the I don't know rule should be rare. As you get more familiar with the cards, interpretations will come faster and easier to you. But in the interest of keeping your adventure moving swiftly, feel free to ignore results if it's taking you so long to interpret them that it's harming your enjoyment of the adventure. So in short, you prepare your deck, you set your chaos factor, you prepare your threads and character list. This can be empty at start, or you can populate it with information about your adventure you already know. You generate the opening scene, you play out the scene, you manage your list, the threads and the NPCs. You come up with an expected scene and see what happens next. Will it be the expected scene, or will you get an altered scene, or will the scene be interrupted? And then you go back out and play the scene, rinse and repeat. And then when all the threads have been resolved, your adventure is over. Here it goes over how to answer your fate questions. In a nutshell, you will determine the probability of a yes answer. So let's say I chose that it was likely to be a yes answer. That means I will be drawing 2 cards. But hold up. Now we take into account the chaos factor. Let's say the chaos factor was like a 7. I would move up the chart 1 more. So we'd go to very likely. Then I would draw 3 cards. If any of those cards come up yes, that's what this red zone is. If any card comes up a yes, your answer is yes. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, let's say you decided, well, it's going to be 50-50, but the chaos factor is a whopping 1. So you will drop down 2 more. It becomes very unlikely. Then you will draw 3 cards. For it to be a yes answer, all 3 cards must say yes. If so much as 1 no pops up, your answer automatically becomes no. And that's what this over here is talking about, how and explains how to do that. That's it in a nutshell. You don't need anything else. Matter of fact, here's the instructions. You ask a yes no question, perceive odds to it to be a yes answer, move up and down the chart based on your chaos factor, draw that many cards until a yes for any yes odds, or a no for all yes odds, and then interpret your result. And then the PDF does a very good job of going through and giving you an example, actually several examples of how it works, uh, what the various event focuses are, everything else. Here's the event focus result. A remote event. That's something that occurs off camera. It's something that may have happened in a different location or something that happened in the past. You get an NPC action. The event involves a random NPC doing something, taking some form of action. Anything from attacking your character, fixing a car. Use the meaning of the words to interpret what the action is. And of course, in context with your adventure. You can introduce a new NPC. You can move toward a thread. This is you're moving one step closer to closing your thread. It doesn't resolve the thread automatically, but it's just something that moves that thread a little bit forward. Whether it happens off screen or on screen, that thing, whatever it may be in context with your adventure, is happening. And then you also have, well, move away from a thread. That's just the opposite. Something happens in a negative way in that open thread that makes you move further and further away, and it's a little further out of your hand. They gave an example here of a poltergeist. If the event was to generate, maybe they discover that a magic trap has been set up to capture the ghost, and that failed. That's just their example. They would give a pretty good example. Actually, give 3 or 4 good examples throughout this PDF on how to use the cards. Next possible event is to close a thread. This is where you actually close one of your random threads on your list. Then you have an NPC negative result, meaning that something happens to a player or NPC randomly that is a bad thing. Gun running out of ammo midway through a battle, character blundering into a trap, arrows breaking, food getting lost, thieves pickpocketing you, whatever. And then, of course, you have the opposite. Something positive happens. Getting assistance in battle, while wandering through the desert, you come across a source of water. Something positive will happen. And then you also have what's called an ambiguous event. This is neither positive or negative. This is more like adding flavor to your adventure. Uh, it's neither good nor bad for any of the characters. Random things that happen, like at first glance, have nothing directly to do with the adventure. For instance, if you roll an ambiguous event as a scene interrupt in an adventure where 2 FBI agents are driving across the country, maybe the agent driving decides to pull over to the gas station to buy a pack of cigarettes. That's really neither good nor bad. It's just something that's happened. However, an ambiguous event can turn into something more. For instance, maybe that agent, while buying his smokes, is attacked in the station by the doppelganger they're hunting. That's an example of using the cards that way. Here it goes into more detail as far as the expected scenes, unexpected scenes, the interrupts, and it goes into that in deep detail. Then the PDF goes in great detail on how to handle the descriptions, interpretations, actions. They give a very good detailed gameplay example of utilizing the cards. I'm not going to read it, it's fairly long. but when you get the PDF, you can read through it yourself. It just shows in deep detail how to utilize the card. And now we are going to go to the game table, and I'm going to show you what's happening in my little corner of the world. Alright, here are the cards. They came in this nice little handy dandy tuck box. Just your standard cardboard tuck box, nothing to be excited about. You've got what you refer to as these are basically your list cards. Whenever you introduce a new thread or an NPC or something, you will assign it a number, and that will help you randomly determine what NPC or what thread is being affected by the events that happen in the Mythic deck. Your little reference cards to keep track of the chaos factor. I typically don't use this card because I started off putting a die on here, but I would accidentally either hit the die, knock the die over, or grab the die and roll it as part of my stuff, and so I started just writing it down on a piece of paper. But I do keep this card handy to keep track of my yes or no answer cards. And then here is the stack of cards. Right here. I believe it's 71 cards here with all kinds of goodness on them. And in the course of gameplay, keeping track of my threads, ta-da! In my getting set up video, we know one of the NPCs is the village leader. We've also talked to the village blacksmith. Our characters are running around in Fanghorn Forest. There was a necromancer on the loose. We did go back to investigate and go find out what was in that last room, what was supposed to be the lair, and the necromancer was gone. Apparently he feared us coming back or didn't want to be around. So we've introduced the goblin warlord. The characters were then asked by the druid to go on a goblin hunt. They are paying money for goblin ears, and there's a goblin warlord in charge of the goblins. We also have this unknown assassin. This guy, I'm going to suspect, based on my story, he was probably hired by the necromancer to come kill us, to seek revenge upon us. So right now, current threads are the goblin hunt. We have the Necro Guild, basically Necromancer Guild, is after the PCs. There was an abandoned watchtower. Unfortunately, nothing happened from that. We have developing negative weather in the forest. And we still have those mines to investigate back at the first dungeon. And then there was a case of examining I forget what that was. I had to cross it out. But we had to examine. Oh, yeah, we came across a dungeon entrance. But we didn't want to go in there alone, because it was a very large dungeon entrance and we feared lots of bad guys. So we kind of skipped over that. And luckily we got to close a thread, and that was a thread that got closed. So luckily no one's come to chase us from there. But that's just a simple example, and there's where I was keeping track of the chaos factor. That's just a simple example of how to utilize these cards. These cards will work for pretty much any role-playing system you got, whether you're using the actual Mythic system or any other RPG. I do highly recommend that if you're looking for something to add to your arsenal for your solo RPG, check these out at DriveThruRPG. Link will be down below. Your support, of course, will help support this channel. For me to bring more exciting things to you from DriveThruRPG or wherever else I can find them. Actually, I want to say 50% of the cost came from just your guys' support. So thank you. And until my next video, happy gaming!